So, welcome to Space the Nation, Supplemental Edition. We are a podcast that talks about the intersection of science fiction and politics. And you, I think, are the perfect person to talk to today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hey, I'm Ezra. I'm one of the co-founders, co-executive directors of the Indivisible, which is a nationwide movement organization working with thousands of local leaders across the country who are leading themselves to save this democracy.
It's a decentralized organization.
It
And
is.
it
Well,
sort of operates on its own principles, like a unified set of principles, but a decentralized organization. Am I correct about that?
that is exactly right. I think it is. What we have found is that the most effective form of organizing against an authoritarian regime does not come from a top-down structure. That actually depends on motivating normal, everyday people who are fed up to the regime to believe that it's worth fighting against and building something better to replace it. So there might be some things to talk about here.
I think there might. Let's. Do you work for a sunrise you may never see? Is that what you work for?
Oh gosh.
Have you made your mind a sunless space? Is that? Am I getting that?
And I said, I hope I see a sunrise that we're building
That's true.
towards. That is the goal, but we
Yeah.
are all part of something much bigger than ourselves, and there's a lot of sacrifice involved.
Okay, let's get straight. Let's stop talking
Yeah.
obliquely.
Okay.
The reason I wanted to talk to you is because I went to the No Kings protests in July. Yes.
June
And
14th.
June. I went
Donald
to the No
Trump's
Kings
birthday.
protest. That's right. I went to the No Kings protest in June and saw, quite to my surprise, the pre-printed signs, like the downloadable PDFs. These were not handmade signs that said, "I have friends everywhere."
Yeah.
Which is a quote from Andor. It is the password that the members of the loose organization, not yet an organized rebellion, very important in the Andor history, in the Star Wars history, that phrase is used by people who are self-organizing
That's right.
against the Empire. So just tell me the story of how that sign came to be.
I'm a fan of Andor. Leah, my spouse, is a fan of Andor. We loved it, and I gotta say, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. Like, I've seen the movies, but I wouldn't consider myself a super fan. And I do think this is almost just part of the culture now. Andor doesn't need to be just appreciated by people who love Star Wars. I viewed it as the best political drama since The Wire. I mean, the coverage of what it's like to engage in the political system from the point of view of the politician, from the point of view of the regime, from the point of view of the grassroots organizing, which contains different coalition elements with different strategies that sometimes coincide and sometimes butt heads. The mix of the interpersonal and the political, I think it's just absolutely brilliant. And putting aside the acting and the visuals, it's not quite a map for us, but it does offer some real inspiration. And so we were writing down lines literally as we were hearing it from Nimik's manifesto and from the interplay between the folks organizing and saying, God, that's good. That is good stuff. That is exactly what we're doing. And the concept of I have friends everywhere is just so basic. It's easy for everybody to understand, and it pushbacks against this fundamental goal of our regime and of any authoritarian regime, which is to make you feel alone, to make you feel like you don't have friends everywhere, make you feel like they're all powerful and there's nothing that you can do, so you might as well just roll over, because that's reality, hard as it may be, but it's going to be the reality forever. So this concept of I have friends everywhere is like, wait, there are more of us than there are of them. We actually do have power. And then it's just a simple matter of organizing. That's the challenge in front of us. So I think it, gosh, cut through. It really did.
And I'm just curious about like the actual like meeting where someone was like, you know what? We should put that line of dialogue from the Disney Plus show that we're all watching on a sign for people to carry into our rally. Or sorry, carry into their rallies, right? Not your rally. Their rallies.
Right. I mean, some of this just comes out in the streets, right? So we're doing these No Kings
Mm-hmm.
rallies. Where did No Kings come from? It came from signs that we saw at earlier rallies that we were holding. People created them and we said, oh God, that's catching fire, and that really cuts through. And frankly, I'm trying to remember, did we see a sign that says, I have friends everywhere from Andor, and then jump on it? Or did Leah and I have that line in our head and we brought it up in the group Slack and said, hey, we should do this? It might have been both. It's hard. We don't have a documentarian who was following us around to find out. But it clearly caught fire. You know, we put it out there, but nothing, we might not have been the first ones to put it out there. And it doesn't matter if we put something out there if it didn't have some organic energy behind it. And I think it did, because it did cut through. It met the moment.
To be
So
clear,
that,
I did see the handwritten signs as well. And then Nimik's manifesto quoted all over the place,
oh yeah,
including just the last line, which I also love. Remember, try.
right.
And something to keep in mind as we move forward is that's the other goal of a regime, is to keep you from trying, is
Yeah.
to keep you from thinking about what's even possible, is to keep you from looking up from where you are right now and seeing the goals ahead. So I
Yeah.
know there's a part of me that's like, Yoda says there is no try, there's only do or not do.
This is why Andor kind of exists outside of the rest of the Star Wars universe in some way. It feels like it's in our universe. I got to say,
Mm-hmm.
I got kind of chills with you just for saying. I saw a supercut of Nimik's lines recently and just watched it like 3 or 4 times again
I
because it came
posted
out.
it to Blue Sky yesterday. It's the Tom Holland rule. You know that rule, right?
No,
The Tom Holland rule is if someone posts Tom Holland's lip sync of Umbrella,
that is great
you have to repost it.
because it just
Internet
brings
law.
joy to people's lives.
You have to repost it. And so I've decided that the Nimik manifesto also falls under the Tom Holland rule, which is if you see it, you have to repost it because it's a different kind of joy, let's say.
Yeah.
But it is so enriching and hopeful, right?
Yeah.
Enriching and
It's
energizing.
hopeful because it doesn't feel like rose-colored glasses hopeful. It is real hope, which is situated in an understanding of how dark things are. The tools of the regime, it's in Andor, but it's in any regime, the Nimik line is the pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it. And this is a hallmark of authoritarian regimes that we understand. The enemy actually isn't just Darth Vader or the dark side or the empire or Donald Trump or the Republicans or Democrats who aren't willing to fight back. Like, those are all opponents. The real enemy is nihilism and cynicism and fatalism, this sense that there's nothing you can do that matters, so you might as well give up. And so the sense of remember, try, it hits on a key feature of successful anti-authoritarian movements, which is not, did you stop the regime from doing bad shit? Because the regime is going to do bad shit every freaking day. They are going to do damage that you can't stop. And one way to view that is, we're doomed. We can't do anything. Let's just give up. And it's successful anti-authoritarian movements, therefore, judge their success by 1, are you bigger than you were before? 2, are you more unified than you were before? 3, is the regime less popular than it was before? And 4, are you trying new things? Are your tactics proliferating? And that doesn't mean that everything is bright and sunny and is going to be fine. Probably things are going to get worse before they get better. There is a lot of risk. There is reason for the fear. And also, if you want to get through this, you got to try.
So you posted on Blue Sky. One of the reasons why we're talking is I had mentioned it to you before, my interest in talking to you. But Tony Gilroy actually did a little PSA for the No Kings rally. Tony Gilroy, the showrunner, one of the writers, creators of Andor, although everyone listening to this podcast is going to know that. Not surprised. Well, you know what? I'm a tiny bit surprised that he was that explicit.
We talked before the first No Kings rally in the lead up to it and got connected with him, in part because we were fans and in part because one of our goals here is to not just be organizing activists to do activisty things. That is not going to be sufficient. There's a number out in anti-authoritarian circles, 3.5%. This comes from fancy researchers at Harvard and elsewhere, Erica Chenoweth, Maria Stephan, who look at how do you successfully build a movement against an authoritarian breakthrough moment. And the answer is you need about 3.5% of the population. It's not everybody. It's not even half the
Right.
population. It's just 3.5% of the population. In the US context, that's 11 or 12 million people. But what it is more than just political junkies. It's more than just people who watch MSNBC or CNN every day or read the Washington Post or read the New York Times. You actually need this to be a cultural moment. You need there to be a sense that this isn't just about, we reached out to the Andor folks and they were eager to talk. And we talked to Tony Gilroy about this before No King. So we've been in talks for the last several months now. Andor was not written about the current moment, but it was written about something very foundational to the human experience and what it's like to live in society with each other. And the current moment is relevant to what Andor was speaking to. And it's very clear which side of the fight Tony and the folks behind Andor are on, which is the side of the people and not on the side of the regime.
What I find remarkable is this synchronicity between in the moment and also people like you being drawn to it. Like, I have Star Wars wallpaper in my office. The fact that I love Andor is not is not going to surprise anyone. Like,
Yeah.
I'm considering getting a U-wing tattoo on my biceps, but I actually really am.
Yeah. Love it.
But for people like you, it is something that you were surprised by your own, like how into it you got?
I think that's fair. And in fact, Leah was pretty resistant. I was like, we should check out Andor because people are saying good things bad. She's like, I don't want to watch a Star Wars show. And we were hooked immediately. And I do think that the best movies, the best shows, the best art of any kind is able to speak to something deeper and draw you in, even if you aren't a super fan. And I'm a proselytizer now. I tell everybody. I'm a convert.
I did a story about Graham Plattner, the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Senate hopeful in Maine, and he was able to quote Luthen's monologue to me.
Wow, that makes me like that guy even more. I mean, he certainly is. The moment, I think one part of the problem with the moment that we're in right now is politics feels like total bullshit to most people in this country.
Mhm.
At best, it's horrific, and at worst, it's absolutely devastating. There's a spectrum there, and I think one of the problems with that basic reality is it leads a lot of people to believe that resistance isn't worth it, that engagement isn't worth it. And I'm excited for a new generation of leaders who are approaching this moment having a similar analysis of the current political system and coming in and offering a different version of what the future can be like. I think Plattner is a version of that. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting primary challenges from folks who share that orientation. And I hope people try.
When I have talked about my love of Andor online, sometimes people have ridiculed me. I made a joke at some point that was like, Disney learned nothing from Andor when they did appear.
Our press release led with Disney clearly never watched Andor in response to
Oh
Kimmel being
no!
fired. That is what our press release said.
I knew that we had a lot in common, you and I. So great minds think alike, or even just Star Wars minds think alike. And I got a lot of pushback from a certain segment of unfun, people, the fun police on Blue Sky. They were like, how could you expect Disney to learn anything? This is just a product. And I do think, I'm not ignorant of that, right? Like, I understand that cultural artifacts exist in an economy, that we live under capitalism. Do you think sometimes it is like, do you have in the back of your head the awareness that we are putting a lot of meaning onto something that is ultimately a commercial product?
Well, what do we do with that meaning? Like, are we just consuming it, or are we actually taking action as a result of consuming, digesting, and incorporating it into our daily, weekly, monthly practice? I'm not that interested in consumption of any kind, whether it's political news consumption or pop culture consumption. For the purposes of building a movement that protects people and communities and democracy, what I really care about is people doing shit. Like that's what I want. So if Andor brings people into some form of engagement in a way that they weren't before, that's valuable. And I don't care exactly who the backers of it were, if that's bringing people into the movement. I would also say every institution in this moment, just about of substantial size, is being bullied by the regime. Like that's the hallmark of an authoritarian regime. And you saw that against Disney and ABC News and Kimmel. You see that against Columbia University and Harvard University. You see this against law firms and businesses. That's how regimes operate, because they're scared of any source of power. And Disney's a source of power. ABC News is a source of
Authority is
power.
brittle.
Authority is brittle, right? And you have to keep on it.
Authority is the mask of fear.
Oppression is the mask of fear, right?
Oppression is a mask of fear. Authority is brittle and oppression is the mask of fear. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's unnatural. That's the other thing. It is unnatural. And so they have to keep on assessing where is the risk out there. And the risk is everywhere people gather, everywhere there are institutions, which is why you see Kimmel being bullied off the air, which is why you see on CBS them taking Colbert off the air. Any place that might stand up to the regime is a threat that needs to be bullied into submission. Here's the thing, the rational move for a Disney or a CBS News or a Columbia University is to see that pressure and say, well, we ought to buckle, because there are real consequences if we don't. And in the absence of organized countervailing pressure, that's what they'll do. What we saw with Disney is there was threat from the regime. They caved, got Kimmel off the air, and then suddenly 1.7 million people canceled their Disney Plus subscriptions, and we were all asking them why they hadn't watched Andor. And they brought that into their decision making. We were that countervailing force. We tried something. And I think that my lesson from that is not that any one of these institutions is an inherently bad actor that is impossible to deal with. It's that it's our responsibility to organize the countervailing pressure, to force them to be good actors in their own self-interest.
At least just acting in their own self-interest in a way that isn't destructive. I think I raised my eyebrows a little bit about the rational response of an institution to bullying, because I think something you see in Andor, as a matter of fact, and is historically true, and my co-host Dan Dresner brings this up whenever he can, which is any time you appease an authoritarian regime, they will just ask for more. There is actually a rational reason to resist. Because if you knuckle under, a regime will never be happy with you knuckling under once, right? Darth Vader says, I have altered the terms of the deal. Pray I don't alter them further.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things you do when you're in a resistance position is reward people for not knuckling under.
That's right.
Right? Like you kind of have to start with that kind of response as well. Like you see people doing that now with Costco as opposed to Target.
Yeah.
Right? Like you see people, and there's still corporations that, anti-capitalist in me is never going to stop having a little ping every time I praise a corporation or every time I think they're on the side of good. But it matters, right? Like you have to use the carrot as well as the stick. And I'm going to remind people of they have that power. Individual decisions have a effect. And I think that's another thing that authoritarians want us to forget, that any individual action can matter.
I'm going to half agree here.
Okay.
And there's a reason for this, because actually I think of our unit of activism as not being the individual. And I think if we act purely as individuals, we're probably going to fail. In a country as big as ours, in a constitutional republic like ours, individuals, unless you're super rich and super famous, have very little power. I think organized groups of people have extraordinary power and move mountains. And this is why our unit of activism comes down to the local group. How do you organize yourself in groups of people? And then together draw on the creativity and inspiration of those individuals to accomplish big things. But I think you're also right to push back on me about what is in the short-term interest. You're right that bullies look for weakness and they respond to strength. And if you demonstrate weakness, they're like, ooh, good, this is a weak target. We can roll over them more. When I say that it's a rational decision, the inputs that the board members or the CEO are responding to are pretty short-term. And it's our job to make those longer term, to make them see that in this week, this month, maybe it would make sense for you to get the regime off your back to give in here. But that's very short term. And it's going to come back to bite you in the butt sooner than you think. And the way that you should know that's the case is that there are a lot of people out here who are organizing to make clear that the current conditions that we're all living through are not permanent, but there will be a new era of accountability and reform that's coming. Subpoena power is not going to be in the hands of the same people forever. Hearing power is not going to be in the hands of everybody. And in fact, even before any election happens, if your capitulation is gratuitous enough, you'll see a lot of people organize to cause a lot of pain that you don't want. And you should factor that in.
I fundamentally believe we're agreeing on all of this. So I'm not going to call this pushback. I'm just going to call this a reminder.
Yeah.
Which is to go back to Nimik. Because we can always go back to Nimik. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. And I think, to me, that is a reminder of individual. Which is, it takes someone, as in the season finale of the first season, so it takes one person to throw the first rock. We're not in violence yet, but it's ahead of the Indivisible rally this Saturday. I honestly, there's a part of me that's like, well, I have a lot to do. I do believe we all have bandwidth that needs to be husband, but it also does matter. Like, everyone listening to this, I hope they think about, can I go? Right? It's like voting. Like, if it does your individual 2 feet, right? Like, your heart and soul on the, where I would go would be the Texas State Capitol, their pink granite dome in the middle of downtown. Like, my being on that lawn means something, and not just to me. And maybe this is just the hurdle that I have is the one of, surely other people also care about this, so I don't need to go.
Well, it turns out when I say our unit of activism is the group, who makes up groups? It turns out it's a lot of individuals who are being part of it.
Who may not think of themselves as a group yet. That's the thing.
That's right.
And that I believe is one of the reasons that Andor is so powerful, right?
And Andor going into, Andor going into Rogue One, the sense that everybody is doing their part and we're all part of something bigger than ourselves, but together it adds up to even more than us individually. I think that's so obviously real and clearly a description of most things society has produced that we are proud of. It is people deciding to be part of something bigger than themselves and recognizing they are not everything, but they are an important part of it.
I think that's why Cassian's journey is so resonant.
Yes.
Because it goes from someone who's a solo rebel, right? It's the same as Han Solo's journey, although I think it's even more moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story of someone who thought of themselves as an anti-authoritarian, probably, right? Thought of themselves as a personally kind of a rebel, not obeying society's rules, etc. And then slowly, very, very slowly, over the course of 2 seasons, 5 years, what is it? Gets to play one of the most important roles in this alternate history that we have. And when I wound up writing about the June No Kings rally, I couldn't stop thinking about the actual end game of Andor and the fact that there is violent resistance, and that this goes back to something you mentioned earlier, which is there are different factions of every movement that have different ideas. Is that something that you understand?
I think there are places, so I guess what I would say is this is where I see the two stories diverging pretty seriously in the real world. The only way that I understand to take down violent authoritarians is through mass peaceful protest. And that is not namby-pamby, kumbaya, peaceful protest because you're scared of the results of the other side. I don't believe in violence, but actually I think it's a strategic choice to not engage in violence because the whole theory of pushing back against an authoritarian regime is that you need mass people power. It's the same theory that led the civil rights marchers to go through Selma peacefully, even though there was a violent threat from the regime. And it was not a belief that they weren't going to face some kind of serious consequences, but it was a belief that you needed lots of people to be part of the opposition to a violent regime. And that the only way to build that kind of mass opposition was to engage in the kind of tactics that everybody could see themselves being part of. And that the minute that a movement turns to property destruction or violence, you lose vast swaths of the public who should be with you. So I think it is strategically super counterproductive to engage in that kind of behavior. I understand what drives some people to be so frustrated with the system that they would consider it. And what I would say is it's a massive strategic mistake that will likely result in the authoritarians using their monopoly on violence in order to use that monopoly against otherwise peaceful protesters.
All right, last question. We're coming up on Halloween. Who do you go as if you're going to a costume party? What character from Andor? It doesn't have to be your absolute favorite character, but like who would you want to dress up as?
Well, unfortunately, my 5-year-old son is going as a king, and it's really it's very unfortunate. He just had his birthday and he dressed up as a king. So I think I or his sister will go as a protester. That's the current plan. Nimik's the inspiration. I frankly, I don't. Andor's the a hero of the story. I identify less with Andor. I like the idea of opposition. I like the idea of organizing masses of people in service of justice. It's not a very good costume, though, is the only problem.
No, you get with the little deer hunter
the little hats.
hat.
Yeah, maybe the
and
hat.
then the little hat, and then you get like a little like Nintendo recorder. Looks like kind of like a handheld gaming thing. And then I guess they're all very dark browns and maroons.
The early part of the first season, him in the woods writing in his little manifesto.
Yeah, I think you could pull it off. Well, thank you so much, Ezra. This has been a delightful conversation. I'm glad we were able to connect. And I wish that you were the target audience for the show in general, but maybe you can tune into our Andor recap episodes. And if you decide you're going to go deep dive into Star Wars, like, we're here for you.
Well, maybe I'm a convert. Maybe I need to dive in head first now.
Right. Thanks again for talking.
Great talking.